Americans eat chocolate every single day without thinking twice about it. It sits on checkout counters, fills holiday baskets, and gets handed to kids as a reward. But what if the chocolate you are grabbing off the shelf is loaded with toxic heavy metals, made with ingredients that barely qualify as food, and sourced from farms where children are working in dangerous conditions? Tonight, we are exposing 6 U.S. chocolate brands you are probably eating right now. Not obscure imports, not specialty brands, the ones sitting in your pantry, your desk drawer, and your kid's lunchbox. And what we found should make you put them down for good. The problems go beyond bad ingredients. We are talking dangerous levels of lead and cadmium in products marketed directly to children. We are talking about child labor that has continued for decades despite corporate promises. Shocked. We are talking about products that contain so little real cocoa, they legally cannot even be called chocolate. And we are talking about companies that know all of this and continue selling these products to millions of families every year. We ranked these 6 brands from bad to worst. Stick around until the end because brand number 6 has contamination levels so alarming that health experts say even small regular amounts pose a genuine risk, especially to children under 12. But first, hit that subscribe button right now, because everything we are about to tell you is information these companies spend millions of dollars hoping you never see. Russell Stover is the largest boxed chocolate manufacturer in the United States. Those heart-shaped boxes appear every Valentine's Day, every Mother's Day, every Easter. The gold foil and elegant fonts signal premium gifting. The reality inside is something very different. Start with the fat. Real chocolate requires cocoa butter. Cocoa butter is what gives genuine chocolate its smooth melt, its glossy finish, its rich texture. Russell Stover replaces cocoa butter with palm kernel oil because palm kernel oil costs a fraction of the price. This substitution technically reclassifies their product not as chocolate, but as compound chocolate, which is an industry term that essentially means chocolate-flavored coating made with cheaper fats. What you are gifting someone on Valentine's Day is a compound chocolate product dressed up to look premium. The cream centers are no better. They are built from corn syrup, sugar, and partially hydrogenated oils. Partially hydrogenated oils are the source of artificial trans fats, which are so dangerous that they have been banned outright in several countries and severely restricted in others. The United States still permits them in small amounts per serving, which allows manufacturers to label products as 0 grams trans fat while still including them in the formula. Russell Stover also uses artificial vanillin in place of real vanilla. Vanillin is synthesized from petrochemicals or from wood pulp byproducts. It produces a vanilla-like flavor at a tiny fraction of the cost of actual vanilla extract. So when you taste that familiar sweetness and assume you are eating something close to real food, you are actually tasting a petroleum derivative passed off as a flavor. The cocoa itself is sourced with 0 transparency. Russell Stover does not participate in fair trade certification. They do not publish sourcing information on their website. They do not disclose which regions their cocoa comes from or what labor standards their suppliers follow. That silence is not an accident. When a company refuses to disclose where their ingredients come from, it is almost always because the answer would hurt sales. The boxes are also preserved to sit in warehouses and on store shelves for months at a time. Potassium sorbate and other chemical preservatives make this possible. Fresh, quality chocolate does not need preservatives. The fact that Russell Stover requires them tells you everything about the base ingredients they are starting with. Palmer is the company behind those Easter bunnies, Christmas Santas, and Valentine's hearts sold in every drugstore and dollar store in America. They are inescapable during the holidays. And they are not chocolate, not legally, not by FDA standards. Look closely at the packaging next time you see a Palmer product. It will say chocolatey or chocolate flavored. That wording is not accidental. It is legally required because Palmer products contain 0 cocoa butter, not minimal cocoa butter, 0. The entire fat content comes from palm kernel oil and other vegetable oils. Under FDA regulations, a product without cocoa butter cannot be labeled as chocolate. It must use alternative descriptors like chocolatey or chocolate flavored. What Palmer sells is essentially sugar and vegetable oil with cocoa powder mixed in for color and taste, then poured into molds shaped like holiday figures. The ingredient list confirms it. Sugar is listed first. Palm kernel oil comes second. Whey powder third. Cocoa appears somewhere in the middle of the list, which means by weight it is one of the smaller components of the product. You are buying a chocolate-shaped object that is mostly sugar and vegetable fat. Palmer manufactures to one standard only, the absolute lowest possible price point. Their entire business model depends on parents buying holiday treats based on price without reading the label. The cute shapes do the selling. The ingredients are irrelevant to their marketing strategy because they count on customers never looking. Children are overwhelmingly the ones eating these products, and children are the most vulnerable population when it comes to poor nutrition and chemical exposure. Feeding a child an Easter bunny that is legally required to avoid the word chocolate should concern every parent who assumes they are giving their kid a reasonable holiday treat. Palmer has no ethical sourcing policy, no fair trade involvement, no organic certification, no public disclosure about labor practices on the farms supplying their cocoa. They buy from whoever is cheapest. What happens on those farms, who harvests that cocoa, and under what conditions are questions Palmer has never shown any interest in answering. Whitman's sampler has been a fixture in American gift-giving since 1912. The brand carries enormous nostalgic weight. People buy it because their grandparents bought it. The yellow box with the cross-stitch design feels like tradition. What it actually contains today has almost nothing to do with the quality that built the brand's original reputation. Whitman's sampler boxes sit on retail shelves and in warehouse storage for months before being purchased. In some cases, testing and retail observations suggest products may sit for close to a year or longer. The preservatives added to the formula allow this extended shelf life, but no amount of preservative chemistry can stop flavor degradation. The cocoa fats oxidize, the textures change. By the time someone opens that box, they are eating chocolate that has been declining in quality for a very long time. The coatings are compound chocolate, not real chocolate. Like Russell Stover, Whitman's substitutes vegetable oils for cocoa butter. This dramatically extends shelf life because vegetable oils are more stable than cocoa butter, but it also produces that characteristic waxy texture and dull flavor that anyone who has eaten both real chocolate and compound chocolate will immediately recognize. The cream centers rely on corn syrup and partially hydrogenated oils as their base. Fruit-flavored centers use artificial flavors rather than any actual fruit content. Nut centers use the smallest quantity of the cheapest nuts available. Every element of the formula is optimized for cost and shelf stability rather than taste or nutritional value. The packaging actively works against the consumer. Gold foil accents, elegant fonts, and the old-fashioned aesthetic all signal quality and heritage. The product inside delivers waxy compound chocolate with artificial flavored cream centers that may have been manufactured a year ago. The gap between presentation and reality is one of the widest in the entire confectionery industry. Whitman's publishes nothing about where their cocoa comes from. There is no sourcing transparency, no certification participation, and no public commitment to ethical labor practices. For a brand selling on the strength of tradition and trust, the silence about ingredients and sourcing is a significant betrayal of the customers who still associate the name with quality. Mars Incorporated makes some of the most consumed chocolate products in America. M&M's, Snickers, Milky Way, Twix, and Dove all come from the same parent company. Hundreds of millions of these products are eaten every year. And the ingredient lists on many of them read less like food and more like an industrial formulation guide. Start with M&M's. The candy shell contains blue 1, blue 2, red 40, yellow 5, and yellow 6. These are synthetic petroleum-derived dyes approved for use in American food products. Multiple peer-reviewed studies have found associations between artificial food dyes and increased hyperactivity in children, particularly those already diagnosed with ADHD. The evidence is significant enough that the European Union requires warning labels on any food product containing these dyes. Those labels must state that the product may have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children. America does not require this disclosure. Mars sells M&Ms to children without any warning. European children get a label, American children get nothing. The chocolate coating itself in M&Ms contains minimal actual cocoa. The primary ingredient is sugar, followed by cocoa butter and skim milk, with cocoa solids making up a relatively small percentage of the formula. You are eating a sugar shell with artificial dye surrounding a chocolate-flavored coating that is mostly sugar and dairy. Snickers bars add more problems. The ingredient list includes corn syrup, sugar, and partially hydrogenated soybean oil. Corn syrup as a primary sweetener rather than actual cane sugar is a cost-cutting move that also produces a different glycemic response. The partially hydrogenated soybean oil again brings artificial trans fats into the picture. Mars products have tested positive for lead and cadmium contamination. The levels found in testing exceed recommended safe intake levels for regular consumption, particularly in children. The company markets aggressively to children through cartoon characters, bright colors, and sports sponsorships. The gap between the fun, approachable image and the contamination data is significant. Mars also relies on West African cocoa sourced from supply chains with documented child labor. The company has made public commitments to eliminate child labor from its supply chain, with deadlines that have passed without the promised progress. Independent investigations continue to find child workers on farms connected to Mars suppliers. Commitments without enforcement mechanisms are just public relations.
Hershey's is the brand most Americans associate with chocolate itself. The brown wrapper, the distinctive shape, the smell, it is baked into American culture in a way no other chocolate brand matches. It is also one of the most heavily contaminated chocolate products sold in the United States. Independent testing by Consumer Reports identified lead and cadmium in Hershey's milk chocolate bars at levels that exceed California's maximum allowable dose levels under Prop 65 regulations. California's standards are based on the scientific consensus about what constitutes a safe level of exposure for daily or regular consumption. Hershey's milk chocolate did not meet those standards. Lead is a neurotoxin. There is no level of lead exposure that scientists have identified as completely safe. Any amount causes some degree of biological harm, with children suffering the greatest consequences. Lead exposure in children has been linked to reduced IQ, developmental delays, behavioral problems, and learning disabilities. The effects are often permanent. Cadmium is a heavy metal that accumulates in the kidneys and bones over time. Unlike lead, which the body can partially process, cadmium builds up with each exposure. Long-term cadmium accumulation causes kidney damage and has been classified as a human carcinogen. Regular consumption of cadmium-containing products accelerates this accumulation. The contamination enters through two pathways. Cadmium is absorbed directly by cocoa plants from the soil in which they grow. Farms in West Africa, where Hershey's sources the majority of its bulk cocoa, have naturally occurring cadmium in the soil at higher levels than farms in other regions. This contamination cannot be removed during processing. The only way to reduce it is to source from lower cadmium regions or to test and reject contaminated batches, neither of which Hershey's does consistently. Lead contamination can occur at the processing stage when cocoa contacts leaded equipment or is exposed to environmental contamination in the supply chain. Premium chocolate manufacturers actively test for heavy metal contamination and reject batches that fail their thresholds. Hershey's buys bulk commodity cocoa based primarily on price. Rigorous contamination testing would require rejecting portions of their supply and paying more for cleaner sources. That conflicts directly with their cost structure. Hershey's has lobbied against California regulations that would require warning labels on products exceeding Prop 65 thresholds for lead and cadmium. They know the contamination exists. They have chosen to fight the regulations rather than fix the sourcing. The product itself is also barely chocolate by any meaningful standard. The cocoa content is low. Sugar is the primary ingredient. The chocolate flavor relies heavily on the combination of dairy and minimal cocoa rather than rich cocoa solids. You are eating a sugar and milk candy bar with enough cocoa to justify the name. Child labor investigations have repeatedly documented farms supplying Hershey's using underage workers. Hershey's has made ongoing promises to address this since at least 2001. The practice continues because addressing it meaningfully would require paying prices that allow farms to hire adult workers at fair wages. Hershey's is not willing to pay those prices.
This is the one we warned you about at the beginning. Hershey's Special Dark is marketed as the sophisticated, health-conscious choice. The dark packaging, the higher cocoa percentage messaging, the implicit association with antioxidants and cardiovascular benefits. It positions itself as the chocolate you can feel good about eating. The testing data tells a completely different story. Consumer Reports testing identified Hershey's Special Dark as having the highest lead and cadmium contamination of any major chocolate brand tested. A single ounce of Hershey's Special Dark contained lead and cadmium at levels that exceed California Prop 65 daily maximum limits by margins that are not close. A person eating Hershey's Special Dark regularly is not consuming trace amounts of heavy metals. They are consuming amounts that exceed regulatory safety thresholds with every serving. The reason dark chocolate has higher contamination than milk chocolate is directly tied to what makes it dark. Dark chocolate has a higher percentage of cocoa solids. Cocoa solids are exactly where heavy metals concentrate. The higher the cocoa content, the more concentrated the cadmium and lead per ounce. The feature that is supposed to make dark chocolate the healthier choice is the same feature that makes Hershey's Special Dark the most contaminated option on the shelf. This is not a problem unique to Hershey's dark chocolate. High cocoa dark chocolates from multiple brands test higher for heavy metals than their milk chocolate counterparts, but Hershey's Special Dark tests at the extreme end of this range. The combination of high cocoa content and low-quality bulk West African sourcing without rigorous contamination testing produces the worst result in the category. Children and pregnant women face the greatest risk. Lead crosses the placental barrier and can affect fetal brain development during pregnancy. For young children, the developing nervous system is uniquely vulnerable to lead's neurotoxic effects. Parents who choose Hershey's Special Dark over milk chocolate because they believe it is the healthier option are inadvertently exposing their children to higher levels of dangerous heavy metals. Hershey's has known about this contamination data. They have had access to the same testing results that Consumer Reports published. Their response has been to fight regulations requiring warning labels rather than to change their sourcing practices or implement contamination standards that would protect consumers. The company's position, stated through their lobbying activity, is essentially that the burden of knowing about heavy metal contamination should not fall on them. The taste does not even justify the health compromise. Quality dark chocolate from ethical, carefully sourced producers has complex flavor profiles. It has floral and fruity notes. It melts smoothly. Hershey's Special Dark is bitter and chalky with a flat, one-dimensional flavor that reflects low-quality bulk cocoa processed quickly and cheaply. You are paying for a health halo that does not exist, eating worse chocolate than premium alternatives, and exposing yourself to the highest heavy metal contamination in the category. Now you know the 6 brands to put back on the shelf. But you need alternatives, and they exist without requiring a significant lifestyle change. Look for Fair Trade certification on any chocolate you buy. Fair trade standards prohibit child labor and require minimum prices that allow farmers to pay adult workers fair wages. It is not a perfect system, but it is a meaningful baseline that conventional chocolate from the brands we just exposed cannot come close to matching. Tony's Chocolonely was founded specifically to fight child slavery in the cocoa industry. They pay above-market prices for verified slave-free cocoa, publish their sourcing information with full transparency, and produce genuinely excellent chocolate. The price is comparable to premium American brands. Alter Eco sources organic, fair trade cocoa and has shown consistently lower heavy metal levels in independent testing. The chocolate quality is genuinely superior to anything from the 6 brands we covered. Equal Exchange operates as a worker-owned cooperative that pays cocoa farmers directly. The structure ensures money flows to the people doing the actual work rather than disappearing into corporate margins. Divine Chocolate is partially owned by the Ghanaian cocoa farmers who grow its beans. Farmer ownership means the economics of chocolate production actually benefit the people at the foundation of the supply chain. The chocolate is fair trade, organic, and notably good.
If you are buying European chocolate brands in the American market, you benefit from stricter European regulations on heavy metals, artificial ingredients, and the definition of chocolate itself. Products manufactured to European standards are generally safer and of higher quality. When you are reading labels, look for cocoa and cocoa butter near the top of the ingredient list. Avoid products listing sugar first. Avoid artificial colors by name. Avoid partially hydrogenated oils in any amount. If a product says chocolatey or chocolate flavored rather than chocolate, you are looking at a compound product with no cocoa butter. The 6 brands we exposed tonight, Russell Stover, Palmer, Whitman's Mars, Hershey's Milk Chocolate, and Hershey's Special Dark, all share the same basic priorities. Lowest possible cost, maximum shelf stability, aggressive marketing that creates an emotional connection the product cannot back up, and a complete indifference to the health of consumers and the welfare of the children harvesting their cocoa. Millions of American families are eating these products every day, assuming they are reasonable treats. They are not. They are chemical-laden, heavily contaminated, often ethically compromised products sold by companies that have chosen repeatedly to protect profits over people. You now know which brands to avoid and exactly why. You know what to look for on a label. You know which certifications matter. And you know that spending a little more gets you chocolate without heavy metals, without child labor, and without artificial dyes that European regulators consider dangerous enough to require warning labels. If this changed how you see the chocolate aisle, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this with every parent you know, because these companies are counting on people not knowing what is inside these wrappers. Drop your go-to chocolate brand in the comments below. Tell us if you are switching after what you just learned. The next time you reach for a chocolate bar, you will read that label completely differently. And that knowledge is exactly what these companies do not want you to have.